Basic Skills Day 1, Operations with Integers. We're going to work on adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. So let's recall a few things from previous courses. So first of all, let's talk about real numbers. The set of all numbers that can be represented on the number line are called real numbers. So every number that you can place on a number line is a real number, including decimals and fractions. So this number right here looks to be negative 2.5. That is a real number. Okay, so any fraction or decimal is included. So another thing I'd like to review is what the absolute value of a number is. The absolute value of a number is the distance from 0 on a number line. And we use these absolute value bars to denote absolute value. So if I want to know what the absolute value of -1 is, that is 1, because -1 is one space away from 0, and so that is why it is 1. Or if you want to know the absolute value of 4, you're asking how far away is 4 from 0 on a number line, and it is 4 spaces. So it's 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space. Now that's different from the opposite of a number. So the opposite of a number is the number that is the same distance from 0, but on the opposite side of 0. On a number line. And you can actually use the negative symbol. That also means the opposite. So if I ask you to take the opposite of a number, I'm asking you how far away from 0 is it on the other side, but on the other side. So the same distance. So I could ask it using that negative symbol, or I could ask, what is the opposite of, for example, if I ask for the opposite of 4, then that would be equal to -4. Now, opposites and the number itself have a special relationship, and they are called additive inverses. So a number that is opposite, a number and its opposite are called additive inverses. And their special relationship is their sum will always be 0. So if you take a look at the 4 and its opposite -4, and you add them together, the sum of a number and its opposite will always be 0. So let's talk about adding and subtracting. There are specific rules for adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers in general. But I like to encourage you to think about a model like temperature outside, like positive and negative temperatures, or football yards, or even money to help you. But the technical rules for doing it are, if you're adding and the signs of the numbers are the same, you're going to add the absolute value of each. And then you're going to take the sign that the numbers both are. So if you take a look at -3 and you're adding -2, you can think of it as adding 3 and 2 together, the absolute value, to get 5, but then you take the sign of those numbers. That's what that looks like. Or if you look at it's -3 outside and we have a gain, or we add a loss of 2 more degrees, we are now at -5 degrees, or a loss of 5 degrees. So if the signs are different, you are still going to take the absolute value of each number, and then you're going to subtract the smaller number from the larger number. And once you do that, you're going to take the sign of the number with the bigger absolute value. So if you look at something like -3 and you're adding 7, okay, you're going to take the absolute value, which are 3 and 7, and you're going to subtract the smaller 3 from the 7, which gives you 4, and then you're going to take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value, which would be the 7, so you would get +4. The good news is, with subtracting, you can actually change every subtraction into addition, because subtracting is always adding the opposite of the second number. Now in middle school, some teachers will use kind of mnemonics like cha-ching or add op or chop chop to help you remember that, okay? But if you have -3 and you are adding we are subtracting now, and we are going to be subtracting 7 this time. Now what you're going to do is you're going to add the opposite. So you're going to change this to add and then the opposite, and you're going to get -10 for your answer. But again, you could think about models. If you lose 3 yards in football and then you lose 7 more, you're going to be at a loss of 10. I'd like you to try these examples right now. I'd like you to pause the video, do each of these without a calculator, and then put the video back on and see if you got them correct. So as you're checking your answers here, remember these are all no calculator, and yes, it does get a little trickier with some negative numbers, but challenge yourself since this is review, but these should be the answers you should have gotten. Now, if you got one wrong, again, go back and look at the rules or look at a model to see what you have done incorrectly. But if you take a look at something like number 5, if you have a 5-yard gain in football, and then you lost 4, but they're taking away that loss, you are now gaining that back to have a total gain of 9 yards. Now, it does get confusing when you're thinking about this, but try to use those models like money. If you have $5, you thought you lost 4, but now you're taking away that loss of 4 that you thought you had. Now you're at $9 that you have. So again, try to use the rules, try to use models to make sense of adding and subtracting positive and negatives. Here's an application example. Suppose an iceberg extends 75 feet above the sea. So here's that part extending out. And the bottom of the iceberg is at an elevation of -247 feet. What is the height of the iceberg? Well, for this problem, we have to add this part that's below the level of the water and above, which means we're going to be adding those numbers together. So 247 feet below, and then we're adding 75 feet to it. That is the total height, or the total height of the iceberg. So when we add these together, we get 322 feet is the height of the iceberg. Here's another application. If Jeff opens a savings account with $57, so he's got $57 in that account. Later he deposits $32. A deposit is a gain. So now in his account he has $89. But now he makes a withdrawal, which means he's taking money out, and if he takes money out, then he is going to only have $44 remaining in his savings account after the deposit and withdrawal. So now I'd like you to try this application. It involves several different gains and losses in football. See if you can come up, pause the video, see if you can come up with the correct answer. So it might be easier if you start out that you have a gain of 7 yards, and then you have a sack or a loss of 2 yards, then you have a gain of 6 by a quarterback sneak, and then followed by another loss of 13. So again, when you write it out like this, okay, you started out with a gain of 7 and you lost 2, so now you're at 5. but now you're going to gain 6 more yards, which means you're at 11. Now you subtract 13 from that, and you are at a -3, which means a loss of 3 yards. And on the next two plays, if you start out with a loss of 3 yards, and then you have a gain of 24, and then a loss of 17, you are now going to be, this is actually, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is going to be actually a loss of 2 because I had a little mental math error, which happens. So now I'm actually right here at 20 after I have my original loss starting at a loss of 2 and then gaining 24 yards means I have a gain of 22. I lose 17 more, which means I have a 5-yard gain is the total yardage. All right, one more for you to try. And read the 2 problems. Try to solve them. I would encourage you to draw a picture. This makes you think a little bit harder. And then turn the video back on and see if you got it correct. So here are the answers. Okay, when the plane is flying 1,800 feet above the 100-foot tall building, how far is it above that actual building? Well, we take the 1,800 feet and we subtract the height of the building to get 1,650 feet. Now, that same plane flying above somebody that's under the surface of the water, we've got that 1,800 feet above the water, and then the diver 80 feet below that, so we're going to be actually adding that 80 feet, or we're going to take away that negative. And that is the end of our basic skills day 1.